Hello, everybody. This is Georgianne Hughes, and this is The Bite Show. And we're very blessed to have Douglas Riggs with us. And I would ask the listeners, please go to The Bite Show, go to the audio library, click on Douglas Riggs' name, and his page will open up, and scroll down, and please read his bio. It's very important that you read his bio. And you can email Douglas Riggs at this address. It is DW_Riggs, RIGGS, at Verizon.net. And with that, we're going to get started. This is going to involve SRA, DID, and Dr. Joseph Mengele. Hi, Douglas.
Hi, Georgianne. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Oh, yes.
And I want to thank also those that have been willing to come on tonight. There's some of the folks here at Morning Star. There's Dan and Susan and Julie and Sally. And we have also a person who lives in New Jersey, goes to assembly there where her pastor, James, is the pastor. And she's been working on her SRA-DID issues for probably at least 14, 15 years at least. I first met Barbara back in the latter 90s when Pastor James came to us from Tulsa. And also, I forgot to mention Connie, Constantina, she's here. So I didn't mean to forget Connie, but so we have her here. But as I was saying with reference to Barbara, she's had quite a journey. And she's actually the half-sister of Dan in terms of the royal bloodline that she came out of. Excuse me. So we have a representation here of the O'Collins dynasty, and that which, of course, is well known in terms of the Windsor dynasty and Great Britain now. Their current power and position in the satanic kingdom is, of course, it's propped up, if you will, if I could use that term, with the O'Collins bloodline. But the O'Collins is the oldest Druidic bloodline in the world. It's according to Frank Collins, it goes back to 4,500 years. So what we're going to be talking about tonight, I think, is somewhat historical. Is the person that maybe some of the younger people have never heard of, but most people who have any connection with history and World War II are familiar with Dr. Joseph Mengele, who is the notorious angel of death, who of course, he got 2 degrees, 2 doctorates. He studied under Professor von Verschuur, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, and he, of course, studied various disciplines, anthropology, but he went into under Verschuur, von Verschuur. He went under the research head of eugenics and how to create a pure racial bloodline in Germany. The Nazi doctors, of course, were notorious as really leading the way of trying to bring about the purification of the Germanic people and creating a pure Aryan bloodline. And so I thought, just by way of an introduction, I have a book in front of me. It's probably one of the most definitive works on that particular era of history, and especially the Nazi doctors. And the book I have in front of me is titled The Nazi Doctors, Medical Killing and the Psychology of Genocide by Robert J. Lifton, which was released in 1985. It's over 500 pages, and it's quite an exhaustive history of just who the Nazi doctors were and their mindset, which is you really can't put your mind around what these people, what they represent. But chapter 17, Robert J. Lifton titles it this way: Dr. Auschwitz, Joseph Mengele. And it's interesting that that's how he describes Dr. Mengele, as Dr. Auschwitz. And in the opening of this chapter, it reads like this: the SS man from Mein Kampf, very righteous and puritanical. This is Auschwitz prisoner doctor. Another quotation from an Auschwitz prisoner doctor is, quote, he was capable of being so kind to the children, to have them become fond of him, to bring them sugar, to think of small details in their daily lives, and to do things we would generally admire. And then, next to that, the crematoria smoke. And these children, tomorrow or in a half an hour, he is going to send them there. Well, that is where the anomaly lay. And so it is quite incredible that this individual got away with what he perpetrated. He was never captured by the Israeli Mossad, although they were close on his heels on a number of occasions, but he was never captured. And so I just thought I would just begin with allowing Dan. I don't remember if it was Sally or when we first heard reports of Dr. Joseph Mengele's involvement and being hired by various members of the royal family to actually do the trauma-based mind control, the programming as it's called. But I think I first heard of Mengele back in the 90s as we were working with various people who are now in their 50s or early 60s. Yeah, when I first heard of Mengele, I began to check around to see if anyone else had come across him as a programmer. And I remember first mentioning to Dr. Tom Hawkins, who is now with the Lord, he had not heard of it. In fact, as I began to report the extensive involvement of Dr. Joseph Mengele in terms of trauma-based mind control with the people I'd been working with, and not only in Morningstar, but in other places where I was traveling throughout the United States, he began to think it was just, a Doug Riggs phenomenon. But after about 2 years, in fact, I just told Tom when we were discussing this one time, I said, well, Tom, maybe you haven't gotten deep enough into the people you're working with. Because if some of these people are members of the royal family, of the European royalty, as it's referred to, I think sooner or later you're going to find it. Well, about 2 years later, after I discussed this with him, I got a call from Tom. He says, do you have a picture of Mengele? I said, yes, I do. He said, would you fax it to me? And I said, yeah. And I said, why? And he says, there's a person here that says that Mengele was involved in her programming. And so we just talked about, just having him lay some pictures out there on the table. There's pictures, 4 or 5 or 6 sets of pictures. Just include the picture of Mengele and to see what happens without any names. So he laid several pictures out on the table and then introduced the fax that I sent him. And when this woman saw Dr. Mengele, she immediately curled up in the fetal position and was unable to speak. She was in a place. She really regressed into a place of abject terror. And I will just have to say, in my experience with working with the people here, Georgianne, and all those who are listening, is that what he has done, and there are other programmers too. There's Dr. John Bowlby, who was interfaced with Mengele in terms of the attachment theory, and I think Jean Piaget. They are no longer here, and of course he trained a number of doctors that I won't get into tonight that have taken his place and actually refined some of the protocols. But as I said earlier, I thought I'd just begin with Dan, because I'll never forget as we were working with Dan back in the 90s, he had never, I don't think, Dan, you'd really read anything about Mengele, but you had memories of him, if I remember correctly. you had memories of Mengele at the time. You didn't even know it was Mengele until a certain amount of work we had done and working with undoing the trauma in you, and then it became apparent that this is the man that you had spent some considerable time with. So, Dan, why don't you just open up with whatever is on your heart as to when you think of Mengele, what does he represent in your life?
For me, about at 18 months, we worked, just working backwards, at 18 months, I just began to have memories of this man who sang over me and played the piano and has just a very melodic voice, and it was very tender toward me. And after working around that for a degree of time, I believe the Lord just showed me that it was Dr. Mengele. And then when I saw a picture of him, and I knew it was him, I recognized. And again, it was a picture of him early on that time. And I had never read anything about Mengele, or I knew the word Auschwitz, I think probably from having heard it used as far as the camps and things, but I'd never read anything. I didn't know anything about Mengele as far as having read or studied or anything else, but the memories that I had, which are very, very distinct and clear because they were dissociated off, but and I said that he's the closest thing to a father I ever knew. My biological father did not, I think specifically and purposefully did not have any touching or anything like that. And the surrogate father in whose home I grew up never, ever touched or hugged or anything. He was just utterly and absolutely passive and just not there. So out of all the years, the only person especially at the young years that represented anything of like a fatherly figure was Mengele. I believe I was with him for a year to a year and a half, and it was, of course, not every moment with him, but with him, and I think we traveled, or he traveled and took me with him during that time. But and even there's still even a bit of a dichotomy. There's that in me which remembers almost affectionately Josef Mengele and the way he sang over me and was tender, and yet there was that which represented the darkness of the abuse, the acts of darkness that represented being taken into a state of physical death and then being brought back through resuscitation. I know that he oversaw that, but it's as if he's there but not there. Just at that young age, having two aspects around the same person put into place so that there is a dichotomy. It's him, but it's not him. I just still, once I did come to the point where I believed that it was Mengele, then I began to read about him, and I was very shocked to find that the historical accounts of who he is and what he did matched very, very perfectly with my memory, especially the fact that he loved to play the piano. He loved the classical type, and also he sang, and even reading about the accounts in the camps of how he treated the children, it fit with the person that I had memories of.
Yes. Well, whoever's next to you, whoever wants to come up, just this kind of just introduction in terms of what some of you ladies have in terms of memory, and I thought maybe let some of the ladies go and hear, and then of course Barbara, at any particular point you can come in, but we have, want to give all of you time to, at least introduce what stands out in your memory regarding Mengele interfacing with your life.
Hi, this is Sally, and the main thing that I remember is just looking at him and seeing